I've spent 30 years studying the rise and fall of empires. I've walked through the ruins of Constantinople, traced the trade routes that built Rome, and mapped the geographic constraints that doom nations to the ash heap of history. I've watched the Soviet Union collapse from a distance, witnessed China's meteoric rise from the ground level, and predicted demographic cliffs that would shatter civilizations decades before they happened. But I've never, not once, witnessed the exact moment when the entire global order shifts in a single night. That moment was 2:17 a.m. Caracas time, January 4th, 2026. What you're about to hear isn't speculation. It's not theory pulled from dusty academic papers or think tank briefings. It's the real-time collapse of everything we thought we knew about American foreign policy, international law, and the very concept of national sovereignty. The phone call that shattered my world. My secure line rang at 11:43 p.m. Mountain Time. I was in my Denver office working late on demographic projections for Eastern Europe, the kind of mind-numbing statistical work that keeps me grounded in reality when the world feels like it's spinning out of control. The voice on the other end was tense, breathing hard, a contact deep inside the Pentagon I'd known since my State Department days. We'd served together in some of the darkest corners of American foreign policy. This man had never, not once in 15 years, called me after midnight unless the world was about to catch fire. Peter, you need to see this right fucking now. The profanity hit me like a slap. This wasn't the measured, professional tone of a career intelligence officer. This was raw panic. See what? What's happening? Turn on any news channel. Venezuelan airspace just went dark. Complete blackout. Something massive is happening and nobody was supposed to know about it. I could hear him typing frantically in the background, the rapid clicking of classified keyboards that meant he was watching something unfold in real time through military satellite feeds. My hands were already reaching for the remote, flipping to CNN. Anderson Cooper was discussing some mundane political scandal. Fox News was running their Saturday night programming about border security. MSNBC had their usual panel of talking heads debating Trump's latest tweets. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Then my secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from another source, someone I couldn't name even if they put a gun to my head. 3 words that made my blood freeze and my academic training scream warnings I couldn't yet articulate. Thunderbolt has launched. The code name that changed everything. Thunderbolt. Jesus Christ, they actually called it Thunderbolt. I'd heard that code name whispered in Washington corridors for months. It was the kind of operational designation that gets discussed in secure conference rooms between people whose names never appear in newspapers. The kind of plan that everyone assumes is just Trump's typical chest-thumping, too insane, too aggressive, too unprecedented to ever actually happen. They actually did it. I remember setting down my coffee with shaking hands, staring at my wall of maps, those beautiful detailed geographic projections that had guided my career for 3 decades. Every trade route, every mountain range, every strategic choke point that determines the fate of nations. And in that moment, I realized that all my careful analysis, all my demographic predictions, all my geographic determinism had missed something fundamental. Sometimes raw power trumps everything. Inside the Caracas Blitz, hour by hour. Let me paint you a picture of what was happening 2,000 miles south of my Denver office while I was frantically calling sources and refreshing news feeds. Picture this: Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, the man who'd survived more assassination attempts than a Hollywood action hero, had spent his evening in what he believed was absolute security. The Forte Tiuna military complex isn't just any compound. It's a fortress within a fortress, protected by layers of Venezuelan military intelligence, Russian-trained security advisors, and Cuban counterintelligence specialists who'd spent decades perfecting the art of keeping American spies out. Maduro had gone to bed around 11 p.m. local time, probably reviewing intelligence reports about American naval movements in the Caribbean. He knew Trump was positioning ships offshore. Everyone knew. What he didn't know was that those ships weren't just for show. At 2:17 a.m., the silence of Caracas shattered like glass against concrete. The first wave wasn't bombs or missiles. It was something far more sophisticated. Electronic warfare systems that I can only describe as digital lightning. Every radar installation, every communications tower, every electronic defense system in central Venezuela simply stopped working, not destroyed. Switched off. Imagine being in a pitch-black room and suddenly having someone cut the power to your entire neighborhood. That's what happened to Venezuela's military command structure. They went from having eyes and ears across their territory to being completely deaf and blind in approximately 37 seconds. Then came the thunder. The S-17 minutes that redrew the map. U.S. stealth aircraft, Boeing 92 Spirit bombers, and F-35 fighter jets that had launched from bases I'm not allowed to name swept over Caracas like digital ghosts. Venezuelan air defense systems, the sophisticated Russian S-300 missiles that were supposed to protect their airspace, never even detected them. How do I know this? Because my sources were watching it happen in real time through military satellite feeds, and they were calling me with updates that still give me nightmares. The explosions began at exactly 2:19 a.m., massive coordinated strikes that lit up the Caracas night sky with an orange glow visible from space. Social media exploded with shaky phone videos, ordinary Venezuelans filming from their apartment windows as fireballs erupted from their country's most secure military installation. The thunderous roar of aircraft that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their airspace echoed through the valley like the voice of an angry god. But here's what those terrified civilians posting on Instagram and TikTok couldn't understand: the surgical precision of what they were witnessing. This wasn't shock and awe. This wasn't the brutal carpet bombing of World War II or the indiscriminate destruction of Desert Storm. This was a scalpel operated by someone with perfect knowledge of Venezuelan anatomy. Every target was chosen for maximum psychological impact and minimal civilian casualties. Communications towers, not apartment buildings; military command centers, not hospitals; fuel depots, not schools. Someone had provided the American military with blueprints so detailed they knew exactly which buildings to hit and which ones to avoid. Someone on the inside had sold out their own country. While Venezuelan military commanders scrambled to understand what was happening, desperately trying to reach their chain of command through communication systems that had been precisely severed, U.S. Special Operations teams were already on the ground. These weren't the clumsy, prolonged urban warfare operations we'd seen in Iraq or Afghanistan. This was something entirely different, a surgical strike performed by operators who knew exactly where they were going, exactly what resistance they'd face, and exactly how much time they had to complete their mission. They'd bypassed every security layer, every checkpoint, every sensor that was supposed to protect Venezuela's leadership. Within 17 minutes, exactly 17 minutes, they had reached Maduro's personal residence inside the Fuerte Tiuna compound. The Venezuelan president was reportedly still in his pajamas when Delta Force operatives breached his bedroom door, the moment geography betrayed a dictator. Now here's where my geographic brain started racing with implications that kept me awake for the next 3 days. Venezuela isn't some distant Middle Eastern battleground where America has to project power across oceans and continents. This isn't Iraq, 6,000 miles from the nearest American base. This isn't Afghanistan, where supply lines stretch across hostile territory and every bullet has to be flown in from halfway around the world. This is America's backyard, less than 1,200 miles from Miami, closer to the United States than California is to Texas. Distance matters in warfare. Proximity is power, and Trump had been quietly exploiting that proximity for months in ways that even I, someone who thinks about geography professionally, had underestimated. For the past 6 months, Trump had been positioning what he called the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America just offshore from Venezuelan waters. Not some token naval presence designed to send diplomatic signals, massive carrier battle groups, amphibious assault ships loaded with Marines, nuclear submarines, and logistics vessels that could support sustained operations for months, all disguised as anti-drug operations. The official story was that American forces were interdicting cocaine shipments from Colombian cartels. The media had covered it as another example of Trump's tough-on-drugs rhetoric. Even I had written it off as political theater designed to appeal to his base. We were all wrong. That anti-drug fleet was actually the largest staging area for American military power in the Western Hemisphere since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was positioned perfectly to turn Venezuela from a fortress into a target. The geography told the story no intelligence briefing could when your enemy controls the sea lanes, has unlimited staging areas just hours away from your capital, and can project air power from bases you can't even locate. You don't have defense in depth, you have a countdown clock. Maduro had been living on borrowed time and the clock had just run out. The 17-minute extraction, a master class in modern warfare. What happened next reads like a Tom Clancy novel, except it's real and it's happening right now, and the implications are going to reshape how every country on earth thinks about national security. At 2:34 a.m., exactly 17 minutes after the first explosive lit up the Caracas sky, Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were being loaded onto unmarked helicopters, not captured after a prolonged firefight, not arrested after a tense standoff, extracted like a package pickup from Amazon. If Amazon delivered deposed dictators to American warships. I spoke to a retired Navy SEAL who reviewed the operational details and called the entire thing disgustingly efficient. His exact words, and I'm quoting directly because they still give me chills, were whoever planned this operation knew exactly where Maduro would be at exactly what time, exactly how Venezuela's military would respond, exactly how long it would take Venezuelan reinforcements to arrive, and exactly how much time they had to get in and get out. Someone on the inside didn't just hand them intelligence, they handed them the keys to the entire kingdom. Think about the implications of that for a moment. This wasn't just American military superiority. This wasn't just advanced technology or superior training. This was an intelligence penetration so deep, so complete, that the United States essentially reached into the heart of a sovereign capital, protected by Russian advisors, defended by Chinese-trained security forces, monitored by Cuban intelligence specialists, and plucked out its leader like they were picking fruit from a tree. The precision was terrifying. The implications are staggering. The $50 million betrayal? Here's where the story gets truly disturbing and where my years studying the collapse of empires started flashing warning signals I couldn't ignore. The United States had placed a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head, the same price tag they'd put on Osama bin Laden after 9/11 events. But bounties only work when someone with access is willing to collect them. Someone with intimate knowledge of the target's movements, security protocols, and vulnerabilities. Someone did collect. Multiple intelligence sources, people whose names I can't reveal without getting them killed, suggest this wasn't purely an external operation. Venezuelan regime insiders, possibly including military commanders, intelligence officials, or even personal security staff, provided real-time intelligence that made the operation possible. They knew Maduro's exact location at any given moment. They knew his security protocols and how to bypass them. They knew his sleeping schedule, his daily routine, even which room in the compound he'd be in at 2:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning. But why would they betray their own leader? The answer is written in the economic collapse of Venezuela itself, a collapse that reveals the fundamental weakness of any system built on personal loyalty rather than institutional strength. When your national currency is worth less than toilet paper, when your military hasn't been paid in months, when the officers who are supposed to protect you are feeding their families by selling government fuel in the black market, and when the United States offers you $50 million more money than you could earn in 10 lifetimes to make one phone call, loyalty becomes a luxury that hungry people can't afford. This is how empires end, not with external conquests, but with internal rot. Not with foreign invasion, but with domestic betrayal. Venezuela didn't fall because American forces were too strong. It fell because Venezuelan institutions were too weak. The Iwo Jima photos that broke the internet. By dawn, just as I was finally getting through to sources who could confirm what I was hearing, Trump was posting photos on Truth Social that didn't just break the internet, they broke 75 years of international law. There was Nicolas Maduro, the man who'd defied American power for over a decade, who'd survived sanctions that would have toppled any other government, who'd built his entire political identity around resistance to American imperialism, sitting on the deck of the USS Iwo Jima, wearing a blindfold and an orange flotation device. Next to him stood a DEA agent, arms crossed, looking like he was posing with a hunting trophy. The symbolism was brutal, deliberate, and designed for maximum humiliation. The Iwo Jima itself, the ship where they took these photos, was named after one of the bloodiest battles in American military history, a battle that came to symbolize American willingness to pay any price for victory. The hemisphere's most powerful anti-American leader, reduced to a prisoner in American custody, photographed like a defeated enemy. But here's what those photos really represented and why they're going to be studied in international relations classes for the next century, the end of the post-Cold War international order. For 30 years, from the fall of the Berlin Wall to the morning of January 4th, 2026, the rules of sovereignty were sacred. You didn't just kidnap other countries' presidents. Even America's most aggressive interventions, from Panama to Iraq to Libya, maintained some pretense of legal justification. Coalition building. UN resolutions, congressional authorization, international law. Trump just took all of that carefully constructed diplomatic architecture and threw it in the trash. The geographic inevitability. As someone who spent his career studying how geography shapes history, I'd been predicting this moment for years. Not this specific operation. I'm a geographer, not a psychic, but the fundamental collision between American power and Venezuelan resources that made something like this inevitable. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world, 300 billion barrels. That's not just economic leverage, it's geographic destiny. Those reserves don't exist in some remote, inaccessible wasteland. They exist in a country that shares the same hemisphere, the same time zones, and the same Caribbean Sea as the United States. For 20 years, America had tried every tool in the diplomatic toolbox: economic sanctions that crippled Venezuela's economy, support for opposition movements that came tantalizingly close to success, even tacit backing for coup attempts that failed at the last moment. None of it worked because Venezuela's geography protected it in ways that Maduro himself probably never fully understood. Mountains to the south provided natural barriers against Colombian incursion. Jungle to the east created buffer zones that even advanced militaries struggled to penetrate, and powerful allies like Russia and China provided economic lifelines that kept the regime functioning even under crushing sanctions. But geography has one fatal weakness: proximity. America doesn't just share the same hemisphere as Venezuela, it dominates that hemisphere in ways that no other power can challenge. When Trump positioned his anti-drug armada in the Caribbean, he wasn't just threatening Venezuela, he was claiming the entire regional water space as effectively American territory. Every shipping lane, every flight path, every communication satellite that passed over Venezuelan territory was subject to American monitoring, interdiction, or interference. Venezuela had become an island surrounded by an American ocean. Maduro never stood a chance. The morning after, when the world realized nothing would be the same, by Saturday morning, as news organizations worldwide were struggling to piece together what had happened and why the fundamental architecture of international relations had changed, not because of what Trump did, but because of how easy it was. Think about this for a moment. In less than 4 hours, the United States military had penetrated a sovereign country's airspace, neutralized its defenses, extracted its leadership, and faced zero meaningful resistance. Not from Venezuela's military. Not from Russia, which had billions in investments at stake. Not from China, which had loaned Venezuela tens of billions of dollars. Not from the United Nations, which exists specifically to prevent this kind of unilateral action. Nobody could stop them, and more terrifyingly, nobody even tried. The response from the international community was a collective shrug, strongly worded statements, calls for emergency UN meetings that would produce nothing but more strongly worded statements. Meanwhile, Maduro was sitting in a federal courthouse in Manhattan, and Trump was holding press conferences announcing that the United States would run Venezuela until it could establish proper leadership. The rules had changed, and nobody seemed to know what the new rules were. The cliffhanger that changed history. As I write this, as I've been writing and rewriting this analysis for 3 sleepless days, Nicolas Maduro is sitting in a federal courthouse in Manhattan, facing drug trafficking charges that could put him away for life. His wife is in the cell next to him, and Trump is holding daily press conferences where he casually discusses running Venezuela like it's a subsidiary of Trump Organization. But this story isn't about Venezuela. This story isn't about oil or drugs or even the specific grievances that led to this operation. This is about the moment America abandoned the rules-based international order that has governed global relations since World War II and embraced something far more dangerous: geography-based imperialism. Because if you think Caracas was the end of Trump's ambitions, you haven't been paying attention to his increasingly explicit threats against Colombia, Mexico, Cuba, and most alarmingly, Greenland. The methodology exists now. The precedent has been set. The international community has proven it won't meaningfully resist. And the American military machine has demonstrated it can reach anywhere in the Western Hemisphere and extract any leader it deems problematic. The question isn't whether Trump will strike again. The question is where and when, and whether anyone, anywhere has the power to stop him. The night everything changed wasn't just about Maduro, it was about the end of sovereignty as we've known it for the past 75 years. What comes next will determine whether we're witnessing the birth of a new American empire that openly controls the Western Hemisphere, or the collapse of the entire international system that has kept us from World War III for nearly 8 decades. And honestly, I'm not sure which outcome terrifies me more. This is just the beginning.